Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. For those I haven't had the opportunity to meet, my name is Warden Kerr, and as the Warden of Convocation, I'll be your MC for our proceedings this evening. However, before commencing the formal part of the meeting, I'd like to pay a special thanks to UWA graduate Rick Stern and Alexandra for providing the musical interlude. Despite being involved in a car accident last week, Rick insisted the show must go on and indicated he'd rather be here than a well-designed hospital ward. However, that's not all. Next Tuesday, I understand he goes in for emergency surgery. So he said the timing was absolutely impeccable tonight, allowing... So please, can we show our appreciation of that heroic effort in going well beyond the call of duty? Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to welcome you here to the second ordinary meeting for 2015. I'd particularly like to welcome our Chancellor, Dr. Michael Chaney AO, former Chancellor, Clinical Professor Alex Cohen AO, our Vice-Chancellor, Paul Johnson, Miss Lizzy O'Shea, the Guild President, and a very recent member of Convocation, having graduated from UWA on Wednesday. Also particularly like to welcome our guest speaker, Professor Kent Anderson, the Deputy Vice-Chancellor, Community Engagement, Mr. Paul McCann, the Deputy Warden of Convocation, members of the WA Senate and the Council of Convocation, Ms. Brenda Tournier, the Associate Director for Alumni and Community Relations, and all the lifelong members of Convocation, including their guests and friends. Welcome to you all. It is the custom of the university to recognise that our activities take place on Noongar land and that the Noongar people are spiritual and cultural custodians of this land, where they continue to practice their values, beliefs and languages. So I'll now declare the meeting open at 6:02 p.m. and note that I have apologies from former Chancellor and Governor Dr. Ken Michael AC and over 700 other members of Convocation. I'm glad they're not all trying to get in here this evening. Can I ask if anyone wishes to propose apologies that have not been recorded? Thank you very much, Joan. We'll include that in the record of the meeting. Thank you. Yes?
Can I propose that you amend the record to say that the meeting started at 6:32 as opposed to 6:32?
Oh, 6:32. Very, very well done. Thank you, Rick.
That's okay.
You can tell who hasn't had enough caffeine this afternoon. Much appreciated. Any further apologies?
Yes, Dr. Jennifer Searcy and Mr. Redhouse.
Thank you very much, Pauline. Any others? In that case, I'll then move to item 1 on the meeting agenda, the minutes of the first ordinary meeting held on Wednesday, the 4th of March 2015, which appear at attachment A of the booklet for this meeting. Are there any amendments to the minutes? If not, as required under item 2, can I ask someone who attended the first ordinary meeting to move acceptance of the minutes? Jim Paparo, thank you very much. And someone to second that motion? Pauline Tremblett? Thank you very much. All those in favour? I think that's carried. Thank you very much. Can I now move to item 3 on the agenda, business arising from the minutes? During the first ordinary meeting, feedback was received from a number of members indicating they would like to have the opportunity to view the agenda papers prior to the meeting. Because of the cost involved in posting a printed copy to all members, it was decided to make the agenda papers available online, and therefore a link to this documentation was included in the reminder sent out last week. We'll ensure that these arrangements are in place for all future meetings so that anyone can access these papers prior to the meeting via the Convocation website. I hope those who were interested in having a bit of a pre-read took up that opportunity and look forward to getting some feedback on that later in the meeting. Following the first ordinary meeting, we also received requests indicating, was it possible to include more time for questions in the agenda? So this evening we decided to try something a little new and have a Q&A session at the end of the meeting. While I don't have any delusions about my capability to emulate Tony Jones of ABC fame, I will attempt to direct your questions to a panel of speakers and the Chancellor, Dr. Michael Chaney. So if you wish to ask questions, please make a note, and rather than have questions after each speaker, we will then consider all the questions in the Q&A session at the end of the meeting. As this is a trial, we'd welcome your feedback on this change to our format for future meetings, so look forward to getting your views on that. Our next item of business for this evening is item 4, correspondence. Now, while Convocation normally receives enough correspondence to warrant its own post office, the largest number of letters and emails received since the last meeting related to the new branding strategy for UWA. As a consequence, I've arranged for Professor Kent Anderson to address us this evening to outline the background and the rationale for that branding strategy. While I've replied to all the correspondence I've received, I felt it was better to have a presentation on this issue so that everyone was informed on the strategy behind this initiative. We now come to item 5, the Vice-Chancellor's report, which it appears at attachment B. We are delighted that the Vice-Chancellor is able to be with us this evening, and I'd now like to invite him to the stage. Please welcome Professor Paul Johnson, the Vice-Chancellor of UWA. Paul.
Well, thank you very much, Warren. Thank you for the invitation to come along and say a few words this evening. You have my report before you. I won't go through that, but I will just spend a little bit of time talking about some of the issues that are particularly significant to the university. And first of all, the higher education context. As we all know, we have a new Prime Minister, and I am told that by Sunday afternoon we will have a new Education Minister. So the expectation is that Minister Pine will move on and that someone else will be in charge of the Education Ministry. And I think I would anticipate that there will be significant changes in the way in which the government carries forward discussion of higher education in Australia. As you know, the current Higher Education Minister, Christopher Pyne, twice has taken a reform bill to the Senate and twice it's been rejected. Now, it may seem very easy just to sweep away all that with a new government, a new Prime Minister, and say we'll forget about that reform legislation. And I'm sure that's what a new minister would want to do. However, there is a challenge because the reform proposals in the Higher Education Reform Bill included a 20% reduction in government funding for students. And that 20% reduction is still written into the government's medium-term financial forecasts and the forward estimates for the current Parliament and the next 4 years. And so it is not possible for the government simply to sweep away that proposal without incurring a multi-billion-dollar cost in terms of forward public expenditure. How the government will resolve that issue, I simply don't know. But I just point that out, that the higher education sector is still very important in terms of the government's overall financial management, and therefore I think we can expect more discussion about the funding of higher education and where the money is going to come from. I have no idea how that discussion will progress, but it will be of profound importance to all the universities. What the entire university sector is asking for is stability in the policy making and the financial circumstances in which we all work. Because the uncertainty that we faced over the last 18 months has been difficult to manage. It is still the case that we cannot in confidence say to prospective students that they will have a given fee regime for 2016 because there is still on the government's books the idea of a cut in government funding. As I say, I don't think that will happen, but it does create uncertainty both for universities and for students, so that's quite significant. In terms of as you know, in the universities, overall strategy, we focus on research, we focus on teaching and learning, and we focus on community and engagement. In research, the university continues to prosper. As you see in my report, we have recently had Professor Mark Cassidy announced as the WA Scientist of the Year. We've increased, again, our performance in the academic world ranking of world universities, up one place from 88 to 87. And that's a recognition of the tremendous work undertaken by the wonderful academic staff and indeed by many of the high-level research students in the university in terms of the work they do, which ultimately will create a better world for everyone to live in. So research is going very well. In terms of teaching and learning, we're undertaking a lot of innovation and a lot of change. Many of you will have seen that, however, in the Good Universities Guide that was published with quite a lot of publicity about a month ago, this university received a 1-star rating for overall satisfaction, which was disappointing. I mean, we are in the company of the University of Melbourne and the University of Sydney in having that ranking, but nevertheless, we would like not to be ranked like that. I just want to explain two things about that ranking. The first is that it's a ranking which takes the student satisfaction data in something called the Course Experience Questionnaire, a survey of graduates, and then stretches it out into 1 to 5-star ranking. In fact, every university in the country received between 80% and 90% satisfaction ratings from their students. But this guide then says, well, those that are 80 to 82% get a 1-star ranking, and those that are 88 to 90% get a 5-star ranking. Actually, there's not much difference between those universities. We would like to be at the top, in the 88 rather than the 81% satisfaction, but in truth, there's not much difference between all of those universities that are ranked across that scale. Some of you may know of other rankings. Whenever I go on holiday, I look at something called TripAdvisor to determine what hotel to book. Some of you may be familiar with that. If this was a ranking scale on TripAdvisor, every university would get 4.5 stars because we're all between 80 and 90%. The second thing about that ranking is it relates to graduates who graduated in 2013 and 2014. And so it was a survey of those who graduated in 2013 and 2014 and asked them about their experience of the university. So it stretches back a long way. And actually there is not a single student or graduate who has studied at the university since we introduced our major curriculum reform in 2012, who is considered in that survey. And in fact, our own internal surveys of students who have started in the university since 2012 show that their satisfaction with their teaching is going up all the time. So it's a disappointing result. We expect that it will in the future change, it will go up, and that the external survey will better reflect what we're finding from our students currently. And the students here are very dynamic. One innovation this year, which I'm very pleased to make reference to, is something called Bloom at St Catherine's College. Bloom is an initiative set up by students, for students. It's a not-for-profit organisation, and it's designed to promote enterprise and innovation. Essentially, it's run by students for other students to start up small companies, small businesses, to generate ideas and take them out to the market. St Catherine's College has supported this. The students have gone out, they've raised money from philanthropists, from businesses. There is a Bloom laboratory, a sort of innovation incubator at St Catherine's, and already they're generating a lot of ideas. Today's students are very much focused on the future, focused on how they can both change the world and build a career for themselves as they do that. So that's, I think, a very positive move. The third area of community and engagement, let me just mention one thing that we will be doing will be taking place over the next several months. The Senate, many of you will know that we had an event, the first time ever, to thank our many, many hundreds of volunteers, an event we held over at University Hall about 6 weeks ago. We do have many volunteer groups and friends groups in the university. We now know that we have, I think, at least 117 friends groups in the university. Some large, some small, some very long-standing, some recently organised. And Senate has asked Dr. Sue Boyd, of course, member of Senate, to undertake some work to look at how friends and volunteer groups are organised and how they can be better supported by the university, how we can do more, particularly to provide better access to resources, to facilities, and so on. So Sue Boyd will be taking this work forward over the next several months and interacting with many of those friends and volunteer groups so that we can work out how we can better support them. One final thing I'd just like to share with you, because the university has achieved a first of something which I think is very important. This was actually achieved a week ago today, when a new Dean of Medicine was appointed, Professor Wendy Erber. So as of last Friday, for the first time in its history, this university now has more women than men in senior academic positions in the university. So, as of last Friday, across the 6-person executive, we have 3 women and 3 men, and amongst the 9 deans, we now have 5 women and 4 men. And that, I think, is an indication that this university is moving with the times. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. As I indicated, normally we'd take questions at this point, but I'd ask that you make a note of any questions you may have for the Vice-Chancellor, and please feel free to question him when we set up the Q&A session a little later in the program. For those who haven't had the opportunity to read all the detail contained in the Vice-Chancellor's report, I would recommend it as it provides an excellent synopsis of the issues currently facing our university. You have that in your pamphlet tonight, but if you ever need a future reference to it, that's also located with the agenda papers on the Convocation website. We now move to item 6, which is the Guild President's report. This is included at attachment C, and I now invite the Guild President, Miss Lizzy O'Shea, to present her report. Please welcome Lizzy O'Shea.
Thank you everyone for having me, and thank you for clapping about me graduating. It feels a little bit strange. I haven't done any units in a really long time, but it was really nice to be a proper member of Convocation now rather than just a Senate member. So I guess it's a good time to say thank you for all of the support that Convocation has given me this year. I'm finishing my term up at the end of November, so I'm on the home stretch, you could say, although we're in the middle of Guild elections, so I'm sure you'll remember what that means. This has been a really big year for the Guild, and it's been a really strong year for transformation and reorganisation, as I've sort of spoken a bit about in the report. But that has really shown the constant need that we have to keep transforming what we've been doing to make sure that we can continue to deliver the representation and services that we've been doing for the past 100 years. One of the key pieces of work that we've done this year is a student life cycle report, and I'm not sure if I touched on that in the report, but the interesting thing that has done is it's basically some research we've been doing about what students want as far as services, representation, needs, drivers, what they're motivated by, not just when they're at university, but as they progress through university. So the needs and passions of a first-year domestic student is very different to that of a postgraduate international student or a mature age student with children, or even just an international domestic student. So that piece of research we've been working on for the past sort of year was finalised over the past few months, and we've been using that to really have a look at everything that we've been doing and using that to drive new initiatives and changes, but also to look at what the university is providing and if there are any gaps places that we can better market what we're doing to different students by showing the value add and that kind of thing. So that's been really important. And that, I think, has showed a lot of the pressures that students are under. So the current student that we're sort of looking at as, I guess, your sort of average student is not just studying. They're either working too much to earn enough money to keep getting by, or they're studying too much so they qualify for Centrelink so that they can get by in that way. And people are juggling work, study, volunteering to get work experience, all while trying to keep their marks up to probably try and get into postgrad with the new courses model. So that's meant that we've had to alter a lot of the things that we do to make them more appropriate for students, and a lot of that has meant trying to digitise our services as well. So something that I touched on in the report was My Guild, which is our online personal student interface, and our aim is to have a lot of our services both in person and available online, so that if you're juggling all of those other factors, you can log in online, you can apply for a loan, you can see what all the clubs are, you can work out when their events are, and you can sign up to them. And all of those services will be accessible to all of those students who don't necessarily spend as much time on campus. We've had a really intense year for projects as far as capital works as well. So we've got our student collaborative zone, which is a brand new area on the middle floor of the Guild Central Wing, which, if you were involved with the Guild for the past probably 40 years, was where the Guild offices used to be and the Guild president and office bearers. And that's being converted into a collaborative clubs hub that'll have hot desks, bookable meeting rooms. It'll be a really good common hub space for students. And we're finding there is a real lack of those spaces on campus. So there are a lot of spaces in libraries and there are a lot of teaching spaces, but there aren't a lot of spaces outside of catering outlets where you can actually just sit down, plan your sort of extracurricular with friends, and be doing that on campus. And I know the university executive would really like to see a campus where students come, they stay, they make friends, they play sport at night, they study in the libraries, and so that's a priority that we're really looking at. The other two areas that we've been focusing really strongly on are community engagement and representation. So I've touched on that in my report as well, but I'll sort of give you the highlight reel. As far as community engagement goes, something that I noticed at the start of the year was that it was actually in a discussion with Lynn Beasley where we realised that there aren't very many ways to get a youth voice on issues in the community and in the media without going with, if you have university students and you have a guild where you have an elected representative, they can actually be the voice for youth as well. You don't really have that for just the youth in general. And so we've really looked at finding better ways to communicate what we're doing to the community, to expand on our volunteering initiatives, to get more people involved, and to get what the UWA students are doing out into the community. So we've had a much stronger presence in local media. We've had a lot of support from the Post and other sort of local outlets, publicising things like guild volunteering, carbon offsetting, RO Day initiatives, things like that, which has been really positive and I think has really showed where we sit within, I guess, the local sphere and all of the initiatives that we're doing to sort of reach out and give students a voice. We've also been focusing on associate membership, which pulls, I guess, on our relationships with staff. So we've been really trying to show, I guess, a sense of solidarity with staff and also showing these are the benefits that we can bring to you. In turn, you're helping to fund emergency loans and grants for students, helping to fund the Women's Collective, fund our initiatives, and that's been really positive. We've seen associate membership double this year on budget, which I was really happy about. We've also been having a real strong focus on our Guild alumni, which is something that I guess is relevant to mention here. If anyone was ever involved with the Guild, please do get in touch. We're trying to revive what I've heard. Friends of Guild was something that people tried to do for a little while. We've been trying to get some of our networks a bit more organised with regards to people who were involved with the Guild, past presidents, past office bearers, past Pelican editors. And we had a really positive launch of this initiative with the Honourable Kim Beasley, who was an ex-Guild president when he was on campus and helped us open our refurbished Guild Council room, which we had support from the Centenary Committee to do a full refurbishment of our tables and chairs. So that is a really positive initiative that I think links in very well with Convocation, and we've had some really great assistance from Warren in working on that. The final, I guess, highlight for me as far as engagement goes was the event with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, where we hosted His Holiness for a discussion on the importance of education. Was a terrifying experience as far as organisation goes, but went really, really well. And we had really great responses from all of the high school students, staff and community that we invited to the event. I think particularly high schools, it was great to see that PLC, I think, had their Year 12s who came write up their experience for the school newsletter. So the outreach there as far as UWA and the Guild really pushing, I guess, the importance of education and something that significant was really positive with high school students, and was a real highlight for me, my year, obviously. I guess to wrap it up, representation is something that I mentioned, I think, at the first AGM. And I think I said we'd sort of see how we go over the next 6 months and get back to you. So we've been doing a lot of work around students from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds. So our Women of Colour collective is really going very strong. And that was sort of the first starting point where we had a really keen student who wanted to get that up and running, and now she's starting to look at ways that we could start an ethnocultural collective, which would be a student representative voice for students from diverse backgrounds that we currently don't have on campus. And that would be a real positive development, I think, as far as the Guild's representative scope. We've also started initial discussions with students who use uni access, so students with disabilities and medical conditions, and had very positive feedback that they are very supportive of the idea of an access collective, which would give students a voice on how their medical condition, disability, or I guess mental health condition as well, impacts on their student experience. So uni access are the university division that supports these students, but they can only really support the academic scope, and we think that people should be looking at how various conditions affect how you can engage in orientation, clubs, societies, guild events, volunteering, and really increase that scope out. So that has been very positive, and we're in initial discussions with students about formalising that for next year. So that's something that I hope someone comes back in 6 months' time and says is going off and moving forward for the future. Moving forward for the future, we have a number of significant capital projects that are in the works and are finally sort of eventuating so that as we're moving more into an online space and looking at representation and engagement really thoroughly, I think we're really going to see a lot of positive campaigns and initiatives out of the Guild. And we do have our annual report coming out reasonably soon, once I finish my blurb for it. And so you'll be able to see a lot of the really great initiatives that the departments have done this year. So all of the things that I haven't touched on, like our Safety at Night at UWA campaigns and our Environment Collective campaigns, our education campaigns, things like that will all be in our report. So basically, I would just like to finish up by saying thank you again for all of the support. I'm confident that in about a week's time, I'll be able to tell you I'm leaving the Guild in good hands. We've got a really strong staff team. We've got really strong student reps who are coming through the ranks, and it's really, really positive to see those people start to take up these projects, and I can sort of have them come to me saying, you know, I've done this thing, what do you think about it? And it's great. I don't need to hold their hands anymore. So that has been fantastic. And I'm looking forward to them continuing to work on a number of these initiatives more closely with Convocation in future. So that's it. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Lizzy. As I mentioned before, Lizzy will be joining us for our panel of Q&A a little later. So we'll move now to item 7 on our agenda, which is the Warden's report. A full copy of my report is available at attachment D of the brochure that you have here this evening, the booklet. However, this evening I'd just like to report on 4 issues that the Council of Convocation are currently considering. One of the current initiatives is to look at a way of improving the way we conduct convocation elections. When I was elected as Warden in March 2013, I stated that I'd like to reduce the cost of conducting convocation elections. Obviously, any cost saving that we actually arrange is basically a donation to the university, because if we can reduce the cost of administrative processes associated with the operation of convocation, then that's a benefit to the university. We have achieved some reductions, approximately $30,000 to $40,000 each year, by outsourcing the conduct of these elections to the WA Electoral Commission. They're set up to run them and they have a very efficient process for that. However, even with the WA Electoral Commission involved, it costs a considerable sum of money to conduct these elections each year, primarily due to the detailed arrangements that are set out in the statutes, which basically insist on a paper-based voting forms and mail out that, as you'll appreciate, just to mail out to 100,000 graduates is a considerable cost. So in my role of Warden, I believe we have a responsibility to diligently investigate cheaper options. Having had the good fortune to be born in Australia, in a democracy like Australia, I'm a passionate and resolute advocate for democratic elections. However, I wish to encourage everyone who wishes to actually have the opportunity to do so to vote, but to do it in a fashion in which we can hopefully do it less for the current cost of that process. One of the ways we're looking at that is to implement electronic voting, which would enable us to fulfil our legal responsibilities in a democratic manner, but at a cost far less than what we are currently paying. Electronic voting is routinely used for a number of staff election positions within the university, and the new software recently acquired by the university to maintain the graduates database now allows us to provide electronic voting for members of convocation. During the past 2 months, we've had discussions with the responsible personnel within the university to explore how a change to electronic voting can best be achieved. Part of the changes required will necessitate a redraft of Statutes 9 and 12 to enable electronic voting to legally be used rather than the cumbersome paper-based arrangements currently specified. This will require the agreement of the UWA Senate, and as it is the only body permitted under the UWA Act to initiate amendments to the statutes. As a result, we are currently preparing a submission for consideration by the Senate for the necessary arrangements to these statutes so that we can have the capability to use electronic voting if we decide to initiate that reform. To get us to this point, there's been some excellent work carried out by our Statutes Committee, and I therefore wish to commend the work of this committee and especially the individual efforts of Paul McCann, Gary Hawkes and Jonathan Strauss. They've done superb work in that area. Hopefully their work will enable the changes proposed to the statutes to become a reality during 2016, and therefore for Convocation to evaluate the benefits of introducing electronic voting for future elections during the following year. As part of these arrangements, we'll be considering an option for an interim period to offer those who wish to do so receiving a paper ballot form. So we're looking at those transitional arrangements. This is a work in progress and we'll report back at future meetings. The other matter I just wish to bring to your attention, because many of you have, in the recent survey we undertook of communication with the university, highlighted the importance to many of you of the magazines like Uniview that you receive. During July, Professor Kent Anderson informed me the university had taken a decision to review the magazines it produces, including the Uniview magazine that's distributed to all graduates. Professor Terry Ann White, the Director of UWA Publishing, has been appointed to undertake this review. As Professor Anderson was keen for Convocation Council to be consulted as part of this review, he requested Professor White to meet with members of Council to seek feedback. A meeting was organised on Monday the 17th of August so that members of Council could provide their initial feedback, and it was a very useful session. The review should be completed by the end of the year, and regular reports will be provided back to Convocation Council as the review proceeds. The other initiative that we've undertaken in conjunction with Professor Kent Anderson is to develop what we are terming an engagement framework, so to set the ground rules between Convocation and how it communicates and relates to the university. We have both developed up an outline of this framework. Again, it's currently a work in progress, but as we develop that, we believe that it will have the capacity to improve the way that Convocation relates to UWA by clearly defining roles and responsibilities, and we're looking forward to bringing that to you at our next ordinary meeting. During the past 6 months, Convocation Council has also continued to consider its strategic priorities and to capitalise on one of the inherent strengths of Convocation, and that's its unique relationship to the graduates of UWA and their role as lifelong members of the university. To improve implementation of our strategic objectives, we are currently aligning our committee structure with the roles of Convocation. Again, this is something that's being undertaken, but we look forward to reporting back on this initiative. We believe it will end up with a far more direct relationship between our strategic plan and the actual structure in which we implement decisions. So I'm happy to take any questions on these issues or any other issues covered in my report during the Q&A session later in the evening. The next item on our ordinary meeting agenda, item 8, is the Convocation Officers Report. That's at attachment E of the booklet. This report, as required by the UWA statutes, simply contains a list of graduates whose current whereabouts have become unknown since the last ordinary meeting in March. After consideration as to how to make this more user-friendly, we have arranged those missing to be listed by faculty and year of graduation to hopefully help you to check if there's anyone you may know. Please have a look at the list, and if you do know the whereabouts of any of the individuals listed there, please contact Juanita Perez on the email address shown on the screen behind me. We'd love to be able to catch up with some who may not have it as top-of-mind awareness when they shift house or move interstate, to let the University of WA and Convocation know that they have now a new email or residential address. The penultimate item tonight in our agenda is item 9, which is the Independent Audit Report. That report is provided for your information at attachment F. It has been considered and endorsed by the Council of Convocation on your behalf. It's an unqualified audit report and demonstrates that Convocation is in a healthy financial state and able to pay our due debts when they fall due, which is always a comforting factor for a warden. On your behalf, I wish to commend the work of the Convocation Officer, Juanita Perez, for her contribution to this excellent outcome. And again, that's provided in the papers for your information. Item 10 on our agenda relates to other business, and as we have not received any formal request to include additional items for consideration at this meeting, I only wish to raise one item, if I may, in the under other business, and this relates to bringing to your attention the 50th reunion, which is initiated by Convocation each year. As indicated in the slide behind me, this year the reunion is for the graduates of 1965, and it will be held in the Old Ref in Hackett Hall on Saturday the 10th of October. All graduates of 1965 and those who are at UWA at this time are invited to attend. In past years, many of the staff members who were teaching at the university during this period have also attended and added to the festivities. This year, 2 prominent graduates of 1965, the first female Pro-Chancellor and the first female Dean appointed at UWA, will be attending in their capacities as graduates of 1965, and they're looking forward to catching up with friends and colleagues from that era. I understand there will be touring, tasting, toasting, as well as feasting on some fine food and excellent wines. If you're interested in attending, please contact Mrs. Pauline Tremlett, who will now stand up and I think is known to most of you. Thank you very much, Pauline. She'll provide you with further details. On behalf of the Council of Convocation, I wish to thank both Mrs. Pauline Tremlett and Dr. Joan Pope for all their efforts in once again forming the committee for this year's 50th reunion celebrations.